Hey everybody, welcome back to the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. Let's go ahead and get this thing started. So first things first, we did have the clan tactic revealed off of clan standard, and pretty excited to see what these cards are doing. Somebody, I think, suggested that the clan standard would transmute into something cheap as opposed to something that cost 5, which I shot down initially, but turns out that is the case. So congratulations, are you a wizard? The answer is that Clan Standard actually transmutes into a deal 5 to an attacking enemy fast spell, basically a larger Lightning Bolt, slightly better than Lightning Bolt in fact, which is really interesting. So this is sort of our Lightning Bolt style setup, and we are going to be talking about that quite a bit. Yeah, I think overall this card is pretty solid. It's a little hard to evaluate because one of the things that's interesting about Clan Tactic is that if you're dealing 5 damage to an attacking enemy, that's a card that you typically use very early in the game, and this is only playable after you've attained 5 power, which is typically pretty late in the game when people have a lot of sort of mid-rangey bombs. It's also pretty late in the game when people typically want to be playing like lots of power so that they can get to their card draw and their bigger stuff, because a lot of your tempo-related stuff is not necessarily going to be playing around like it's going to be like sort of your high-end stuff, your Champions of Cunning, your Black Sky Harbingers, your Channel the Tempests. Like, if you're playing like Feln stuff or Primal stuff or any type of like just big stuff, then this card gets defensive at a point where it is very weird to get defensive, and becomes power at a point where becomes not power at a point where you kind of maybe want more power. It sort of depends on if you are expecting to get late. That being said, if you're playing a lot of mid-rangey like Elysian or anything like that sort of caps at 5, this is still a pretty reasonable card. I'd say it's actually got a lot of different stuff going on. Like, it is certainly going to be able to kill a certain amount of stuff. People are saying it's a shame that it doesn't deal 6 damage. That would be pretty good against like the more mid-rangey threats and mean that it might be a little bit more meaningful in terms of its impact on the meta. I think overall, like, out of all the tactics that we are gonna see, this one might end up being one of the weaker ones just because it feels a little awkward. But I haven't played it yet, and it's quite possible that it fits very well in the meta slot. We don't really know what kind of units are going to be played down, what kind of decks are going to be available. There are a lot of things that could change my mind on that, and really it depends on how much tempo there is, because this is going to help you out in tempo quite a bit. It's very, very cheap. It allows you to do things like Wisdom of the Elders while still actually playing your Lightning Bolt, so once you turn into 5, like, you still have a ton of awesome, like, reactive options. And I think actually its ability to be used with Wisdom of the Elders makes it a lot better for control decks than I'm giving it credit for. Like, if you're playing a lot of fast spell, just general like fast spell stuff, that kind of control oriented play can actually do a lot with Clan Tactic. All you have to do is make sure that you have other power fixers to make sure that you're doing all of that stuff right. And, you know, cards like Island's Favor, there are ways to get there that actually make it work. So yeah, jury's still out on this one, but it seems reasonably powerful, and monuments are typically always at least somewhat useful in certain decks. It's very hard for these cards to be just outright bad, and I would say that this one probably will see some play. So yeah, looks really interesting. The overall design of it, like, it's interesting to me that Primal is moving into clans. Like, if we're having representation from clans in this, which is there's not like a lot of cards that are sort of related to that. Like, Skycrag is the clan, so this is sort of a Skycrag card. Scarletch was joking around in the Discord that instead of a cycle of 5, there would just be 5 primal ones, but I don't think that's the case. So yeah, we'll see what the other colors are gonna be. It could be like Mage Tactics or like all sorts of interesting things. It's gonna be really cool to see what these cards do, because they will alter the form of most tempo to mid-range decks in a pretty interesting way. And most of them will be like 1 or 2 ofs, sometimes maybe there'll be 4 ofs, but yeah, we're gonna see. We're gonna wait and see. It's gonna be pretty cool. All right, I talked a little bit about the mask the last time, but I was doing it on Twitch, and I also was like really tired at the time, so I don't think I really gave it a lot of credit. So we're going to go back to that real quick. This is Dramatist's Mask. This was spoiled yesterday, and it's a 1/1 charge weapon that at the start of your turn sacrifices the wielder to play a random unit from your deck, then plays a copy of Dramatist's Mask on it. Another pretty tricky card to evaluate, but one that is probably pretty assuredly bad. I would say nonetheless it's a ton of fun. Like this, the charge ability allows you to, when you can actually actively play the charge ability on something, it allows you to do a lot of really interesting things with anything that has good infiltrate effects or anything that has good on-attack effects. So the main problem with that is that Dramatist Mask is very expensive, so it's hard to give a unit charge since you have to both play the unit and play the Dramatist Mask in the same turn to actually make that effectively work. That being said, like there are a bunch of different ways that this actually works out. Like you can either give the unit charge, in which case you're playing something like a big Praxis deck, or you're playing something with a lot of discounting effects, like the Crimson Fire Maw, the Miner's Musket. You could do like all sorts of like interesting ramp things, but generally if you've got good ways to reduce the cost of this weapon, it being a zero-cost weapon would make it very, very solid, especially since there are plenty of ways you can pick it back up with like cards like Reforge or other interesting things. So yeah, that's one way that you could do it. You could just go straight for like, I'm going to give some units charge, and then I'm going to actually benefit off of that by playing more units that also have charge, and those units are going to be all like big, nasty, ridiculous things like Heart of the Vault and Predatory Carnosaur, not Carnosaur, Mystic Ascendant or World Bearer Behemoth, like basically just giant Praxis stuff, giant fire stuff. You can do really crazy things with that. Other things that this card does is it plays just a huge pile of weapons into your void because it constantly sacrifices itself, the weapon on the unit and itself, and then plays a copy of the weapon as well, which you can use to capitalize on cards like Oni Quartermaster or anything that cares about weapons in a pretty interesting way. Like, this might be okay. Like, I don't know if that's going to be the solid tactic either, but it's an interesting jank option. I'd say overall, the main problem here with either of these options, and also with the random unit of your deck option in general, is that, like, basically it's pretty hard to get Dramatist Mask down and defend it. But the other thing that Dramatist Mask does that is fairly interesting is it ramps you into basically any threat. Like, your deck could be Dramatist Mask, some cards that make tokens like Grenadins. Yeah, Dramatist Mask's assembly line. Play an assembly line or something, get some Grenadin down, play a Dramatist Mask on a Grenadin, and then just sit there, just stay still, and then sacrifice your Grenadin. Your deck has no creatures in it, Scourge of Frostome. Like, there are ways that Dramatist Mask can be used to cheat out units in really fascinating methods. Like, I like it in sort of Dural Iceheart decks and Westwind Herald decks and weird stuff like that, because, of course, getting charge on a Westwind Herald or a Dural is a lot of fun. Like, certainly that's something that you can definitely play around with. I can see this card being played in all sorts of different types of jank. We're going to build a lot of different jank decks based around its various different aspects. It's got a lot of Johnny potential, and we'll see if it can find a home. But my guess is that it is just a little bit too ridiculous to be in any tier 1 decks. I just think that it's a cool card, and it's going to be a lot of fun to play, and some of the stuff it's going to do is going to be really silly and degenerate and wonderful, and that'll be awesome. So yeah, Dramatist Mask seems like awesome times. Still a hard card to talk about because it's just got so many moving parts. So that leads us to the final announcement, which is that, well, there has been actually a couple of interesting announcements. We can talk about the news a little bit. So, the Elder Scrolls Legends is moving off of Direwolf and onto some other company that appears to be pretty focused on UI design. Looks like they are moving to like sort of make the game prettier, which makes sense because Bethesda's titles are pretty boring and bland in general, and if you can do really good UI, that doesn't seem like such a bad thing. I don't know anything about it, or like, yeah, I can't really say too much about it. I say like, wish those guys the best, and I did like TESL quite a bit, so that's kind of cool to see that. Like, yeah, there might be some cool stuff happening there. But the main thing about it is that, like, now we have Direwolf Digital also announcing that they are releasing Eternal. Eternal is coming out of early access, and we are going to be seeing the full release with Fall of Argenport, which I hope is the set name. It could be Rise of Argenport. I'd be okay with that as well. But, yeah, like, we're going to be seeing that probably in the next month or two, and it's going to be pretty crazy stuff. So, like... obviously, that entails like maybe a big bump in who's playing, what's being played. We're gonna see, of course, the continued level of like quality that we've seen in the last couple of months. There's been like a really cool ramp up on lore, on the consistency of promo cards and events to keep things interesting. Like there's been so much good stuff happening on that front that I think I'm really ready to see this game released. I'm very excited to see it released, and we're gonna be working on a ton of stuff to try and make sure that it is all like we're all ready for that. The one problem with that is that I am going to a friend's wedding at the start of July, for which will also be like my big family vacation. So I'll be gone the whole week of the 4th of July, starting like the Friday before. And that may actually be when Fall of Argenport releases. If that happens, we're going to have a bunch of videos ready to go, but we won't be streaming Fall of Argenport because I will not be anywhere with internet. That kind of timing has seemed to happen like every time there's a set release, but we just narrowly dodged it last time. Maybe we'll get away with it this time. In any case, with the full release announcement, there was one last card, which we can show off now, which is Kena, Shaman of the Scale. And my goodness, is she to scale? Her image is quite a bit larger than everything else, so we're going to have to shrink that down and move it on over, right? All right, first off, amazing art. This is a dragon shaman, and as you can see, yeah, dragon transforming into a person. This is pretty common, like in fantasy lore, where dragons can sometimes like actually do that kind of thing. Generally cool dragon mages, you know, dragons just get to be awesome at everything. That's how dragons work. All right, Kena, Shaman of the Scale, a 5/6 killer for 7 at 3 primal influence. When you play a spell, she gets +2/+2 and flying this turn, which already is pretty like ridiculous nonsense. Like a 5/6 killer with some decent abilities is pretty cool. And she has a new ability called Tribute, draw a spell from your void. Now we know how Tribute works already. Tribute is a new ability that's going to be happening in the Fall of Argenport. And the way that it works is that if a unit enters your void from your hand or from play, then you get to do whatever the tribute is as a summon effect. So if you play Kena, Shaman of the Scale at the same time that a unit dies, or one of your units dies, then Kena gets the tribute and gets to draw a spell from your void. So if you're playing, like, say, like this seems like sort of Dragon Caldera Cradle type themes, where you're playing like Trail Stories and Caldera Cradle and a bunch of other shenanigans, and then you play a Kena after like you attack with a bunch of dragons, your dragons die, you play a Kena, you get like a Trail Stories back, you play the Trail Stories, your Kena gets huge. Or you could do like, you know, like grab a Channel the Tempest or any number of other cool things, just get a 5/6. 5/6 is a pretty good stat line for killing stuff. Like we've already seen most big killer units just be really, really effective cards. Predatory Carnosaur is amazing, of course. It's definitely the best one by far, and Kena doesn't quite have that stat line at 7, but she does have the ability to fly and the ability to push across for lethal, which means that she attacks the problem on a different axis, and that's quite okay. The other thing is that like we have also seen that Unseen, Lita Most Skilled, which only has killer sometimes as a 4/5, be pretty good. Like that card actually does do a lot of good clearing. Any sort of big killer unit can generally create a lot of board presence. I actually have some high hopes for Kena in terms of what she can do. 7 is a lot less than 8 in terms of playability. We don't see that many 7 drops right now because there aren't that many of them, but most of them are actually pretty playable and pretty usable. So yeah, I think this card might actually be decent. It's got a lot of potential things that could go wrong. Like you could end up with not a thing that you could kill. You could end up with maybe not the spell that you're looking for. You could end up with maybe not having the ability to play the spell and also get the killer effect. It's monocolored, which is actually okay because Rindra's thing is cycling in, so that's fine. Like we no longer really value monocolored versus equivalently colored quite as much. Monocolored is still slightly more vulnerable just because Annihilate will probably be a little more common than Rindra's Choice until a little after, whenever things rotate. But yeah, this is potentially like pretty playable. It's interesting that the card does not have flying by itself, but nonetheless, whenever you play a spell, getting +2/+2 and flying is pretty decent. It means you'll have a little bit of harder time playing around like certain fast spell tricks. There are all sorts of little dials on Kena that could maybe be turned up a little bit to make her a bit more powerful, but as it stands, she does have some pretty abusive potential where she can both A, take over the board a little bit, get you into a stabilizing position, and B, win the game for you because you have a bunch of spells. So Also, she's got card advantage inherent in her whole kit. Like, this is a 7-drop that is a card, kills a card, and gets a card. And those are 3 things that you really, really want in your 7-drops. Like, if you're doing that kind of stuff, then you actually feel really, really solid about it. Cards like Heart of the Vault that do that have been, like, extremely powerful. This one is a little bit more on the expensive side and a little bit harder to play, but I think that the value may actually be there. Might just be worth it. So, we'll see if this card is going to be doing it. Yeah, so that is it for now. Fall of Argenport comes out in the next month or 2. The next season is called Fall of Argenport. There's a cool new sweet little like burning door card back that we can probably show off if we're like very, very tricky about it. I don't actually know how we're going to do that. Let's see if I can actually do that. There's Fall of Argenport, view prizes. Can I actually see the card back? Maybe not, maybe not. Maybe it's in more info. No, I'm not that lucky. All right. Well, in any case, there's a cool new Burning Door card back that we could probably show off if we had remembered to pick it up. But all things considered, Direwolf is in a pretty good place right now. Eternal's in a very good place right now. I'm really excited to see what happens when Set 4 releases. I really want to see more of the plot. I'm looking forward to the lore drop tomorrow, which we're definitely going to be talking about, and I am going to have to go make just a ton of extra videos now so that I have extra content for July, and I'm really, really excited about all of this. So yeah, stay tuned, guys. Thank you to the YouTube folks for watching. Cheers.